The UFC is headed back to the Apex, and they're taking a 40-year-old to the main event with them. My name is Angelo. This is We Want Picks. I'm going to break down the entire UFC Vegas 102 fight card, giving you my picks, predictions, and DraftKings plays. But before we look forward, let's take a look backwards. What you're looking at here is the Post Mortem from UFC 312. The Post Mortem is a brand new premium feature on our website at WeWantPicks.com. And what it does is it takes a historical look at the last event from a DraftKings lens. You can immediately see, here's the UFC 312 event. Everybody highlighted green was everybody in the optimal lineup. You can see every single fighter, what their salary was, what they scored, what their ownership was in different contests, and ultimately you can see what the optimal lineup was. The greatest lineup that could have ever been made, statistically speaking, was this. It had Salkid, Santos, Teixeira, Weili, Mikalev, and Rong Zhu. That lineup would have scored 641 points, which would have been the greatest lineup in the world. If we scroll down a little farther, we look at tournament details. This would show you that not one single person on planet Earth built that lineup. Nobody did. Not one. We could also look at the different individual tournaments, how many entries there were, how many people tied for first, and so on. The Post Mortem is available right now at WeWantPicks.com. It'll be available after every single event, giving you a full breakdown of what happened the day before, so you can look, lessons learned, and make some decisions going forward. We also have a tool called the Event Simulator. The Event Simulator takes all sorts of historical data, including some DraftKings information, biometrics, striking history, grappling history, and then it simulates the fights 100,000 times. After a fight is simulated, you can then go ahead, take that information, and build DraftKings lineups with one click of the button. Right now, it is literally simulating these fights 100,000 times. Here's all of the results. And here's what it looks like if you go ahead and build a DraftKings lineup from these results. And it's working. The proof is in the pudding. The first ever person that used the simulator 2 weeks ago when we released it made a whopping $450 off 50-cent entries. Just last week, we had Jeffrey send us an email saying, I used the event simulator. If I only used it in larger contests, thanks for the great content. And he put out $790 in a winning lineup that was built specifically from the event simulator. We are quite literally building the greatest DraftKings fantasy offering on the planet, and we're doing so at a $10 price point. Last week, we also had the greatest DraftKings ownership projections on the planet. So not only do we have the best projections on the planet, not only do we have an event simulator that will build lineups for you, that will use historical information and simulate fights 100,000 times, then we have a post-mortem that gives you everything you need to know about what happened past tense in the event before, so you can learn some lessons and make some decisions going forward. Quite literally, the greatest offering in this space. It's only $10 for an entire month. That month will give you 4 events. And it's not just DraftKings. You're going to get FanDuel content. You're going to get picks, bets, tools, artificial intelligence, and a ton more. All of it is available right now at WeWantPicks.com. Just click Become a Member. It's freaking $10. $10. The competing event simulator, $295 a month. Ours is $10 a month for everything that we do. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member. Don't be a cheap, weirdo dork, especially if you take DraftKings Fantasy as seriously as some other people do. Let's go ahead and break down this card. We do have 13 fights. We originally had 12. And then they went ahead and they slapped together a brand new fight. And Jared Gordon got a new opponent. But let's go ahead and start at the bottom, work our way to the top. Opening up this fight card is Jacqueline Cavalcanti, and she's taking on Julia Avila. Jacqueline Cavalcanti is $9,500 in DraftKings Fantasy. And while I am insanely confident that she's going to win this fight, I am not going to have her in my DraftKings Fantasy lineup. And that's just because she doesn't score well. And these are close wins. These are split decision wins. The beating on Zara Farron was not really a close decision, but even that didn't score quite well. And that's because Jacqueline's a busy striker. She comes forward. She throws with power. She'll get a little bit of cage control, but nothing crazy. She doesn't typically look to go wrestle heavy, and she's not really getting a finish because these are lady fights. So Jacqueline Cavalcanti likely wins this fight, but she's not going to score well while doing it. If we take a look at her opponent, Julia Avila, the Raging Panda. She's an exciting fighter. She'll come forward. She's a gamer. Don't let the gray hair fool you. She is old. She is a mom. She has had extended layoffs, but she's tough as hell, and she has no problem in a fist fight. She'll move forward, and she'll try to make something happen. She is coming off that loss over Miesha Tate, former world champion. Miesha Tate took her down, held her down for essentially the entire fight, and that was 2 years ago. And now here she is back at it a year and a half ago. And now here she is back at it, coming out of, I don't think that was a retirement, but coming out of her hibernation, and she's ready to go again. I think she's going to be older, slower. I don't think she's still going to have what she needs to do to win at a decent level. And while Jacqueline Cavalcanti isn't exactly a world beater, she's 10 years younger, she's stronger, she's faster. She has everything she needs to win this fight, and I do think she wins this fight. Jacqueline Cavalcanti is the pick, but no chance I'm putting her in a DraftKings fantasy lineup. Got out to get you this, but yeah, I'm in the middle of recording. I should leave that in. I'm going to leave it in. Don't mind that jump cut. That's just the wife busting in on me filming a video so she can grab a charger for her phone. Absolutely no respect. No respect, I tell you. No respect whatsoever. Running a business from the house, working, a father. Nobody cares. They don't care. Come busting in here. You'll figure out the edit, Ange. I need a charger. What if I was live? Women. Don't get me started on women. We will talk about somebody with large breasts like a woman, and that is Valter Walker. And while he has done a few sit-ups and a couple of jumping jacks and reduced his cup size, he's still a slob. Valter Walker has a special place in my heart with rage. This guy pissed the entire world off when he came out here and he couldn't beat Lucas Brzeski. Lucas Brzeski, the guy they brought in specifically to lose to Valter Walker. And obviously he was already on the UFC roster, but he would have been cut. He was a guy like, all right, you know what? Let's have him lose to Johnny Walker's brother, and then we'll cut him. And that's because Lucas Brzeski's not a wrestler, can't defend takedowns, and Valter Walker is exactly that. He's a Brazilian, and he's Johnny Walker's brother, but he was basically raised in the mountains of Russia, and he wrestles like a Dagestani. And Valter Walker showed up in that fight like a bag of old milk, absolutely shit the bed, just embarrassed himself, shit the bed. It was a disaster. Oh, he had 4 takedowns, 7 minutes of control. I promise you, the numbers don't tell the right story. That was an embarrassment for people everywhere. He is a good wrestler, though. And if he has any cardio, he can win a whole lot of fights. He comes forward, bombs away, striking kind of sucks, shoots takedowns. Once he gets a fight to the ground, he's got pretty good jiu-jitsu. He's pretty heavy on top because he's fat. And he has some slick submissions. His last fight was a submission win over Junior Taffa. Got the takedown, rolled to, I believe it was a heel hook, and then Junior Taffa was screaming. He's like, oh! So the ref stopped it. And he was like, well, I didn't tap. He's like, you screamed like you were about to die. That's a tap. Verbal submission is a thing. There's a little bit of controversy there, but nothing was changing. Valter Walker had the takedown. I think it was a heel hook. Could be wrong. But anyway, had the submission, and that was pretty clean. Valter Walker should be able to get the takedowns here, should be able to win this fight as well, but he is fighting Don'Tale Mayes. And Don'Tale Mayes is an interesting guy to break down because while he looked relatively useless in the Gaziv fight, he literally was just like, you push him and he fell down. And then on bottom, he doesn't have much to offer. He does hit very hard. He does have some clean boxing. He's not a quitter. He's tough as hell. And if Don'Tale Mayes can keep this fight on the feet the same way that Lucas Brzeski did, he will embarrass Valter Walker worse than Lucas Brzeski did. I am not going to pick Don'Tale Mayes here. I don't think he'll be able to keep the fight standing. I do think that the couple of sit-ups that Valter Walker did should help his cardio. So I don't have to worry about, oh, it's the third round. Valter's completely done. I think he should be okay because Don'Tale is very tough. And I don't know if Don'Tale is going to just get out of there quickly with a fake heel hook and some screaming. Valter Walker is going to be the pick. He actually might be worth in your lineup if you do think he can get that submission. Even if he doesn't, maybe he gets a bunch of takedowns in control time. Don'Tale Mayes will always be live for a big boy punch to the face, but I just don't think he'll be able to keep this fight standing. Then we have Khaos Williams, and he's taking on the other Bonfim. There's 2 Bonfims on this card. He's taking on Gabriel Bonfim. Khaos Williams is very good. Khaos Williams deserves way more respect than this $7,300 price point. That $7,300 price point is nuts. Who did he lose to? Randy Brown in a technical fight, and then, Pereira in another technical fight. Khaos Williams hits like a freight train. Khaos Williams also has cardio. Khaos Williams also has good takedown defense. So now we have a guy with good takedown defense, decent cardio, power in his hands. Khaos Williams can make this a very interesting fight. He obviously just finished Carlston Harris, but that dude's old and his chin is kind of gone. The Bedoya fight was interesting because he only put up 84 points, but he chopped that dude's leg, just leg kick, and just kept going and going and going. Khaos Williams is very, very good. And I know a lot of people love him as an underdog. I'm going to tell you right now, though, I am not going to pick him as an underdog. Ooh, we click Khaos Williams again. I'm going to go Gabriel Bonfim, but I'm probably not going to spend the $8,900 because let's look at what he did in his last fight, which was a decision over Angelo, 77 points. I don't think Gabriel Bonfim is going to score a lot of points because Khaos is tough, Khaos is durable, Khaos has good takedown defense. So I think Gabriel Bonfim likely wins this fight with some activity, some forward pressure. Maybe he'll mix in a takedown or two. And that's probably not going to be enough to score the 90, 100, 120 points. I think Gabriel Bonfim can win this fight. I think Gabriel Bonfim is better than the Nicholas Dalby loss, the death gas, the finish, because he was smoking Nicholas Dalby early, gassed out, and obviously things didn't go his way there. Gabriel Bonfim should win this fight, but I'm not going to spend the money on him at $8,900. Then we have the UFC debut of Elijah Smith, and he's in an interesting matchup here with Morales. And this is going to be a fun fight to break down because Vince Morales was notably cut from the UFC, did what he needed to do to earn his way back, and now he's fighting a young, talented guy. Let's start on this side of the house, the Elijah Smith side. He's a decent wrestler, decent striker. His hands are fast. He's got good power. Takedowns are also fast. He does a good job covering distance and shooting and reshooting and shooting and reshooting. Jacob called out on our Tuesday breakdown show that, yeah, Elijah's got some decent wrestling, and it looks like it on the regional level, but he was a high school wrestler. This is not some high-level Division I, Division II, All-American style wrestler. Just a kid that wrestled in high school, that's strong, fast, athletic, and stuck with it. I agree with that statement, but I also feel like MMA and straight wrestling are two different things. Wrestling and MMA is all about setting up and timing those takedowns and less about all the wild intricacies that matter on an actual wrestling mat. I think Elijah does a decent job setting up the takedowns because he does have good hands and they are fast and they are powerful. So while you're worrying about that, then he immediately blasts into a shot or a takedown there. He's got some good control. If you scramble up, he's immediately scrambling on the outside, shooting another takedown. So I do think that he can do pretty well in this fight, but it's going to be a tricky uphill battle because he's fighting Vince Morales. Vince Morales, as I mentioned, was cut from the UFC in 2022. Went on the regional scene, put together 5 wins. And in those 5 wins, 4 of them were finishes. He looked good. He earned his way back into the UFC where he fought Taylor Lapilus. Taylor Lapilus is not an easy outing for anybody, so he lost that fight. But it was a good fight. He gutted through it. He showed some toughness. He showed that he's an absolute dog. He didn't quit and he couldn't be broken. That is what worries me here for Elijah Smith. Vince Morales is an experienced guy. Yeah, he technically has last 3 UFC fights or losses with 5 regional wins in between, but these are decent losses to good people. And Vince Morales is an absolute dog. If Elijah Smith comes in here thinking that he can just bomb away super quick, make something happen and leave, that's not the reality of this situation. Vince Morales is not a guy you're just going to get out of there super quick. So, with that being said, I do think Elijah Smith can win. I think he's a decent prospect here. But we won't know much until we see what happens in a real UFC fight against the UFC guy in Vince Morales. The point that I'm making here is Vince Morales lost a couple of fights in the UFC. They sent him on the regional scene, beat the shit out of everybody, then came back to the UFC and lost. All that shows you is there are levels to this. Even a lower level UFC guy who's kind of struggling finding consistent wins can go on the regional scene and beat the piss out of somebody. We don't know if Elijah Smith is a regional guy yet or a UFC guy, and we won't know till this fight. So I'm not going to put Elijah Smith in my DraftKings fantasy lineup. I may have some exposure to Vince Morales at $7,100 because he is a person that I know will go out there and fight his ass off, and I'm certainly building more than one lineup, and I've got multiple entries going on. There's got to be some exposure to Vince Morales here, given the toughness. It likely goes to a decision if win or lose, and Vince Morales could pull out a win. Could put up some decent numbers in a win at that. Going to pick Elijah because of the potential, but if I'm building a DraftKings fantasy lineup, can't have him in there. And then we have Rafael Estevam, and he is taking on Jesus Aguilar. I'm going to go Estevam here. I am going to spend the money. Spoiler alert. Oh, just click the next chapter. Rafael Estevam has power in his hands. He's aggressive. He's a good wrestler. He does all the things. And I think Rafael Estevam is going to come forward, get a whole bunch of takedowns, and make something happen and potentially put up good numbers. He did that in his last fight, and he didn't put up amazing numbers. He only put up 72 points. This fight's going to be different, though, because in this fight, Jesus Aguilar is not just going to accept bottom, if you will. He'll jump guillotine, and then he'll get taken down. He might threaten something, and then Estevam will end up back on the feet, and then he might shoot another takedown. He might engage in the striking. He might even be able to finish Jesus Aguilar. What I imagine here is a lot more takedowns than just the 3 that he got in his last. I think Estevam's going to get multiple takedowns. I think he ends up in a couple of weird positions. Jesus might scramble out. They end up on the feet. He shoots again. I think we get a 4 to 5 takedown type fight. Plenty of control time. Potentially a finish. I think Estevam is just so much better than Jesus Aguilar that any of the concerns for a guillotine or any of that nonsense don't even matter here. The guillotine is an important thing to point out here because Jesus Aguilar has 11 wins. 8 of those wins are by finish. 5 of those finish wins are specifically by guillotine, including his last fight against Nickel. The interesting thing about the Nickel fight is that Jesus Aguilar was marching forward, tagging him up, and Nickel, who was supposed to be the better striker, wasn't winning the striking match. And when he wasn't winning the striking match, he took a bad shot. And when he took the bad shot, poor old Stuart Nickel got himself submitted by yet another guillotine choke. Potentially that could happen here, but I doubt it. I think Estevam is literally better everywhere. I don't think he's going to have any trouble defending random guillotine chokes or other submissions. Estevam, clear pick, very confident. $9,300 is a lot of money to spend for a guy that doesn't have a million finishes, but I do think he wins here, and I think he can make it happen. Then we have... Nope, I skipped Angelo Hill. Then we have Angelo Hill taking on Ketlen Souza. This fight has gone back and forth odds-wise. It was dead even. We had Ketlen as a big underdog, and Angelo Hill now is slight favorite again, and these salaries represent that. Angelo Hill is somebody that we have known for a very, very long time. She has been fighting in the UFC since 2014, 11 years in the UFC, and she's still fast, athletic, and pretty good. Angelo Hill's not going to go out there and finish a lot of people. She did manage to finish Luana Pinheiro, and that was her first finish in like 10 years or something crazy. But Angelo Hill is going to go out there, have good striking, be technical, have plenty of cardio, good amount of speed, and just sort of dance around. That's the game plan. Dance around, be busy, try to be the better striker. Defend takedowns where she can, use the cage where she can. And that's kind of what we got in her last fight, except she lost. Because even though she let her hands go a little bit, she didn't love the pressure from Tabatha Ricci. She ended up against the cage. She defended a bunch of takedowns against the cage, but she spent the majority of the fight against the cage, working her way up when she was taken down, never really settling in enough to let her hands go, and the footwork wasn't good enough to stay out of the way of Tabatha Ricci, and we all know how trash Tabatha Ricci's takedowns are. And she's taking on Ketlen Souza. Ketlen Souza is a pretty good fighter. I was surprised to see this the other day. She was a good-sized underdog, but now it makes sense that we're about even. If you want to give Angelo Hill the slight advantage because of fight IQ, because she is incredibly smart, doesn't make stupid mistakes, then I kind of get it. But Ketlen Souza is a pressure fighter. She will throw heavy strikes. She has an occasional takedown. Everything she does is heavy. Big, heavy leg kicks. Big overhands. Big forward pressure. Big takedown. Solid grappler. If it gets to the ground, she does rely on the strength, meaning she's not the cleanest in the wrestling or the grappling, but she is strong. She is powerful. She just worked her way through Yasmin Yaryui at Noche UFC, and that was at a 7,000 price point. She scored 109 points. She's $8,000 here. I am going to have her in my DraftKings fantasy lineup. I think she comes forward. I think she can pressure. I don't think she's going to finish Angelo Hill. Angelo Hill's been around too long. She's too good. And if Mackenzie Dern's not doing it, I don't see Ketlen Souza doing it. But I do think Ketlen could have a lot of volume, hold her against the cage, get some takedowns, and just stay active enough to put up some real numbers and take a decision win. Now we have Jose Delgado, and he's taking on Connor Matthews. Jose Delgado, UFC debut here. Always red flags. UFC debut, 9,000 price point. Red flag, red flag, red flag. How many times have we seen these UFC debuts shit the bed? How many times have we seen these highly touted UFC debuts shit the bed? Huge favorite UFC debut shit the bread. Especially somebody with as few fights as Jose Delgado has. But Jose Delgado did step up on short notice on the Contender Series to get a win. So he's a guy that seems mentally tough, right? He got the biggest opportunity of his entire life, did so on short notice, and still made it happen. He's a wise rangy striker. He likes to hang on the outside. He uses fight IQ. He uses technique to work that outside game. When he decides to come in, he will fight really well inside the pocket. And I keep saying he's got that Mike Tyson style, like huge upper body movement to get in the pocket and to stay busy while being mobile. He can grapple as well. He's got good takedowns, good ground and pound. Overall, well-rounded kid. He's got all finishes, which is good and bad. It's good because if he wins, hey, hopefully it's a finish. It's bad because if all he's doing is chasing finishes and he can't get it and then he slows down, we don't know what it could look like long-term in this fight. He's fighting Connor Matthews. Connor Matthews showed up into the UFC. I believe it was short notice. Dennis Bazooka got him out of there. Connor Matthews is a volume striker. He moves forward. He throws everything. He also receives everything. He's a very hittable guy that gets hit on his way out of the pocket. You're going to see 5 of his 7 wins are by submission, but he's not like some wild diehard grappler. What he does do is snatch things up in scrambles, climb your back if you're against the cage a little too long. Connor Matthews isn't terrible, but I don't think Connor Matthews is going to be able to deal with the distance striking of Jose or then the pocket power striking of Jose. Jose is going to be the pick. UFC debuts are terrifying, red flags everywhere, but I do think Jose could potentially get a finish here and be worth that price point. Then we have Rodolfo Vieira taking on Andre Petroski. Listen, you guys want Rodolfo to win? You think Rodolfo wins? Put him in your lineup because if he wins, he's going to score a ton of points. Okay, I'm not here to convince you otherwise. And honestly, if I build multiple lineups, I'll have some exposure to Rodolfo Vieira because if he wins, he should score a ton of points as he did in his last fight against Armen Petrosian. But this isn't his last fight. Rodolfo Vieira is a high-level BJJ guy, world-level BJJ guy. He's also physically fit and active and a good wrestler, and all of a sudden he's a big freak athlete. His cardio is a bit questionable. And what I will say to you as a gentleman who has been grappling for 20-plus years, not wrestling, grappling, wrestling for fucking 35 years, Rodolfo Vieira is not nearly as good off of his back as he is when he gets the takedown. If he gets the takedown and he's in control of the situation, it's going to be a big problem for Andre Petroski. But if Rodolfo Vieira gets taken down, sure, he has sweeps and scrambles. He's not useless. He's a world-level grappler. But it's not the same. He doesn't have that same mobility off of his back. So Rodolfo Vieira is going to need to get the takedown early to win this fight. And he might. And a lot of you feel like he will because a lot of you think that Andre Petroski is an absolute used-up bum who can't win fights at this level anymore. And maybe that's the case because we watched him knock himself out fighting Jacob Malkoun. But I will say in that Jacob Malkoun fight, he was winning. He was winning the first round. He won the first round. Second round, he looked okay. He took a shot. I don't know what the hell he did, but he knocked himself out. If he doesn't knock himself out, he was on his way to win that fight. And the only reason I'm pointing that out is because Andre Petroski, got smoked by Michel Pereira. That's Michel Pereira. And then he knocked himself out. That's about when everybody says this guy sucks. He's terrible. Andre Petroski doesn't belong in the UFC. But the reality is he's a high-level wrestler who has big, heavy hands, explosive actions, and good jiu-jitsu. He's not just a wrestler. He's got good jiu-jitsu. I think Andre Petroski could potentially win this fight. If he comes forward, keeps those heavy hands, maybe we get a bad shot from Vieira that Andre can stuff and turn into his own takedown. Or maybe Andre Petroski can catch him clean. Or maybe Andre Petroski can use his high-level wrestling, get a few takedowns, and that he's got good enough jiu-jitsu to stay safe. I think there's a world where Andre Petroski wins this fight. I'm not here to convince you otherwise, though. If you are very squarely on the Rodolfo Vieira side, I get it. Petroski's embarrassed himself a couple of times. Hard guy to trust. So I get it. And Vieira scores well when he wins. I'm going to lean the Petroski side, and I may do a little bit with that $7,400. I think they're both, whoever wins is worth their salary. Let's put it that way. I don't see Vieira winning and not being worth $8,800. So if you think he wins, have him in your lineup. And obviously, if Andre wins, he's going to be worth that $7,400. So I don't think this is like some other fights I broke down on this card where it's like, I think this person wins, but they're not worth their money. If Vieira wins, he's definitely worth that money. I just don't know if he can. And I'm gonna wave that American flag. We're going American wrestling. How? I was going to do an eagle sound. I went Hau for some reason. I don't know what the hell that was. Then we have Nazim Sadykhov, also in an underdog spot, and he's taking on the other Bonfim brother. Nazim Sadykhov, $7,800. And this is a gentleman who does not score very well, but he is a very good fighter. He would have scored well in his last fight if he got the actual win instead of a draw, because they would have given him 30-point decision there, and that would have been 106 points. But if they look at that Terrence McKinney fight, he did get a finish there, only scored 82 points. Evan Elder technically got a finish there, scored 78 points. But he was losing the Evan Elder fight, and then he cut Evan, so they stopped that. He was losing the Terrence McKinney fight, but then Terrence does what he does, so that lost. And then the Vyacheslav Borchet, he was losing that fight too until he took over with a knockdown and a couple of takedowns, and he threw a ton of strikes in that fight. Nazim is a very good fighter. He's an active fighter. He's got good striking. He can wrestle. He can do all the things. Nazim is a good fighter. The losing of these fights before turning them around is interesting because on one hand, it's like he's losing. He was losing the McKinney. He was losing the Evan Elder. He was losing the Vyacheslav. On the other hand, it's like this is a guy who was losing those fights and still figured out ways to win. So you got to appreciate that. Nazim Sadykhov is a good fighter. He's got good hands. He's got all sorts of dangerous techniques, and he's somewhat durable. He is taking on the other Bonfim, the Ismael Bonfim. He's a wild striker. He's got real power. He has no regard for straight punch. He just comes forward and just wings like he's throwing baseballs. He tries to get you out of there. He'll work in takedowns if he needs to. He does have high-level striking. He's got good, clean boxing, but he gets too excited and doesn't really focus on those. That good, clean boxing, though, did do pretty well in his last fight against Vince from Hell Pichel. Because Vince Pichel's a high-cardio guy. And instead of Ismael getting broken by the cardio, he kept the hands going. He boxed him up, stayed on the outside, did get a takedown. They traded takedowns in that fight. Boxed him up on the outside, and ultimately got it done. Was it the most impressive performance? No. It wasn't like when he smoked Terrence McKinney. It also wasn't the disaster that was Benoit Saint-Denis moving forward and mauling him. So he got that win. And that win over Vince Pichel is why I think he can win this fight. Because I think that high volume while not looping striking style of Ismael, I like that. If he comes in looping and crazy against Nazim, Nazim will be a little cleaner. But if he comes in technical and fast, he can win this fight. That's how Vyacheslav was beating Nazim. The good technical striking. The only reason Nazim was able to take over is because he did catch him, but Vyacheslav's chin is questionable at this point, and Vyacheslav has no takedown defense. Ismael's got takedown defense. He's got volume. And he should have a chin. I think Ismael wins this fight. $8,400 is tricky. I'm probably not going to spend that. And I know I'm fading a lot of these fighters, but he just beat Vince Pichel very convincingly and only scored 81 points. This could look exactly the same, or he could potentially lose because Sadykhov is very good. So I'm going to fade Ismael here. Sadykhov also going to be a fade just because he doesn't score well in his wins. Then we have Edmen Shahbazyan and Dylan Budka. Edmen Shahbazyan's a very good striker, all right? He's a good striker. We're going to say that over and over. He's a good striker. The guy's a good striker. He's well-rounded in the striking. He's got kicks. He's got punches, and the striking is good. Takedown defense, not good. Useless on the ground. Useless on the ground. That's why all these losses, he's getting taken down, he's getting finished. He's useless on the ground. His last fight against Gerald Meerschaert, he was winning that fight because he's a good striker. He was dotting up Gerald Meerschaert. Then Gerald took him down, and guess what happened? Useless. Useless. So if you think Edmen Shahbazyan keeps his fight on the feet, then you absolutely should have him in your lineup because $9,200 is not very much money for somebody that could put him out and spend or make a fortune just like you did when he took out Dobson. If we look at his opponent, it's not the most impressive slate here, okay? Cesar Almeida finished him, but he did have 3 takedowns in that fight. And Cesar Almeida is a very dangerous striking. Andre Petroski beat him in a decision, but Andre Petroski took him down and held him down. That's it. The few exchanges they had on the feet, Dylan Budka was biting down and bombing away and fighting like a man. Dylan Budka is a good wrestler. They said on the broadcast he wrestled Division I. That seems to be disputed in the comment section for some reason. On the broadcast, they said he was a Division I wrestler. They said he had Olympic hopes. That part I ignore because we all had Olympic hopes. When I was 10, I was an Olympic wrestler. We all had Olympic hopes. But if he did wrestle at any meaningful level, that means he can take down Edmen Shahbazyan. Even if he didn't wrestle at any meaningful level, he can take down Edmen Shahbazyan. We obviously need to be nervous about every round starts on the feet. But I think Dylan Budka can get the takedowns and beat Edmen Shahbazyan here. Edmen Shahbazyan gets finished on the ground. Edmen Shahbazyan is easy to take down. Dylan Budka has takedowns. Sometimes you just go 1 + 1 = 2, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. I think Dylan Budka can be in your lineup, and I think you can score pretty well there. Conversely, just like I said before, I'm not trying to convince you. Hey, I'm telling you what I'm doing. If you think Dylan Budka is absolute god-awful trash and Edmen blows through him, great. Throw him in your lineup. Sounds like you have a lock. Hey, congratulations to you. You're the smartest man in the comments. That's got to be impressive. I missed the fight. Where the hell's the fight that I missed? Oh, no, we already did Valter Walker's fat ass. Ha! Then we have Youssef Zalal taking on Cavalcanti. And I've been saying, I'm from Connecticut. He's from Massachusetts. I managed professional fighters in the Northeast for a very long time. So Kattar, I said it a certain way, and I said it forever. And then now I say Cavalcanti. It's like, it's not Kattar, it's Kattar. Kattar. It's not Kattar, it's Kattar. Whatever the hell you want to call the guy. He's taking on Youssef Zalal. Youssef Zalal should be in your lineup, $9,400. I think he gets a finish here. And before you comment, they're just saying that because he was on their show. Okay, if he was a $7,000 underdog, then yeah, maybe. But he's not. He's a tremendous favorite. The money continues to pour in on the guy, becomes a bigger and bigger favorite. He's on a 6-fight finish streak. 3 of those fights in the UFC since coming back, all finishes. So to imply that there's bias here because he joined our call-in show and yucked it up with us is insane. He's a massive favorite, and he is for a reason. Youssef Zalal, when he left the UFC, when he was let go from the UFC, albeit after decision losses to Ilia Topuria and giant-ass Sean Woodson, he went to the regional scene. And he went from a distance technical striker to an aggressive grappler that gets takedowns, finds submissions. He is blowing through people right now. And I imagine he did not lose the striking skills that he had. The striking skills that forced Ilia to wrestle. He was dotting up Ilia on the feet. Go watch the tape. Don't just comment some negativity before. Watch the tape. It's possible you're wrong. He was dotting up Ilia Topuria, which made Ilia say, I don't like this. I'm wrestling. And then he very clearly lost the fight because of the wrestling. Youssef Zalal is good. He is dangerous. And this new 2.0 version of him is definitely a problem for a lot of people. And he is going to be a problem for Cavalcanti. Cavalcanti is a good technical boxer. And that's sort of where it ends. And he peaked. His absolute peak was right here with the win over Dan Ige. Actually, that's not accurate. His absolute peak was Chikadze. He got smoked by Max Holloway. And when I say smoked, Max Holloway literally set a record for most amount of strikes landing on someone's face. Literally. That record's yet to be broken, I believe. But then he came back. People counted him out against Giga Chikadze because Giga was so hyped and all these things. And he beat Giga very convincingly. I picked him to win that fight, and he did win that fight. And he didn't even need to use the wrestling. He just has good, clean, technical striking. And if you fight a good technical fight with him, you're probably going to lose unless you're elite like Max Holloway. Because his hands are always where they're supposed to be. He's in and out. He's super clean. He touches you up. He goes. But he also can't really defend takedowns. He's also old. He's slowing down. He's very inactive. He's only won 1 fight since 2020. I don't see Calvin winning this fight. I think trajectories matter. Momentum matters. And I think Youssef Zalal is working his way up very clearly while Cavalcanti is sort of working his way out. He's old. He's slowing down. Like, none of those things are going to bode well for him in this fight. Youssef will be in my lineup because I actually think he finds a finish, even though the over on the round line is juiced. And then we have the main event, Gregory Rodrigues. And I know it's Rodrigues. I know he's Brazilian, but I just like to roll my R's. Women are watching, and women love it. They're like, he rolls his, oh my, oh, heavens me. He said Rodrigues. He is taking on Jared Cannonier. I believe this is Gregory's first ever main event, so his first 5-round fight. It may actually need to be 5 rounds. We'll find out. But he's a very powerful striker. He's also a very good wrestler and grappler. He's got a BJJ black belt. He typically is just using his grappling skills to keep fights standing. But in his last fight, he fought a very high-level striker, and he had the wherewithal to say, maybe I shouldn't be striking with this guy, and I should be shooting takedowns. And that's what he did. He had 4 takedowns, almost 9 minutes of control time. He put up 90 points. Was it the most impressive performance in the world? No. But what it was a window into the fact that this guy can make solid fight IQ decisions. Because before that, he didn't really. Before that, he had success knocking people out. So he was hyper-focused on doing that. So the reason that I appreciated this win quite a bit is because even though he finished Brad Tavares and before that finished Dennis Tululin, he recognized that Christian Leroy Duncan could be a good enough striker to be a problem, so I'm going to grapple. And he did do that, and he got that win. He's taking on Jared Cannonier. Jared Cannonier is 40, and he might be the best-looking, the most physically fit 40-year-old running around. It's incredible. Not only is he like actually a good-looking dude, but for his age, he's the dude doesn't have an ounce of body fat. He's got plenty of cardio, good volume. Like, he's defying logic when it comes to age. Because normally I'm going to say he's 40 years old. When you're 40, the chin goes. You start to slow down. He doesn't seem to be slowing down. The speed is still there. The chin is definitely of concern. Because even though he went to a decision with Caio Borralho, he was almost finished. Imavov did finish him. But if we go back to that Marvin Vettori win, that was one of the most impressive fights I've ever seen. He landed 241 significant strikes. Landed 241. 3 minutes of control time in that fight. He had 4 takedowns. He looked spectacular. If this version of Jared Cannonier. If this version of Jared Cannonier shows up, the one who worked Marvin Vettori, he wins this fight. I don't think he's going to show up. I do think age is catching up with him. I think the chin matters. Gregory Rodrigues is going to be the pick. Lineup's going to be interesting. We do have 5 rounds to work with, so I probably will have him in my lineup. Guys, that's the breakdown. Check out everything we have to offer. The event simulator that simulates fights 100,000 times and builds DraftKings lineups with them. Here's the results of the event simulator over the last 2 weeks, which is as long as it has existed. The best DraftKings ownership projections on the planet. The Post Mortem, which is the latest edition. So you can look at what happened the night before, the week before, 5 events ago. And you can see what worked, who won, how well they scored. All of that is available right now. One package for $10. You get all of that, plus the tools, the picks, the bets, everything. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member. It's $10 for an entire month, and that month includes UFC 313.